Welcome to the Left, Right, Forward video podcast show. The show where you'll hear amazing interviews from people that share their views from the left, views from the right, but always with the mindset of moving us forward. These podcasts are designed to educate, inform, and inspire its audience with relevant information from the past and present. We welcome now the host of the show, Ambassador Delano Lewis.
This is the Left, Right, Forward show, and I'm your host, Ambassador Delano Lewis. This is a show, an interview show with a purpose to inform, to educate, to motivate, and to inspire. The Left, Right, Forward, there'll be views from the left, possibly views from the right, views from the center, but we're always moving forward. Left, Right, Forward show. And I'm so excited today to have as my guest a woman that has done tremendous things. Her name is Shanelle Dupree, and she has a resume that's just a blockbuster. She can start with an author, lawyer, speaker, connector, wife, and mother of four. I'd like to introduce to you my guest today, Shanelle Dupree. Welcome to the show, Shanelle.
Thank you, Ambassador Lewis. It's just a pleasure to be here and to see you on this forum.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm struck by your visual resume, which was outstanding. As I mentioned, author, trusted advisor, speaker, Bible study perspectives. I want to start with one of your speaking topics. How do you become a lawyer and not practice law? I thought that was a fantastic topic. How do you do that?
By accident. So I will say that my journey through the law has been so interesting and so rewarding. When I graduated from law school, it was in the middle of the Great Recession. And so there were no legal jobs that were available. People were losing jobs. And for those that were hiring, they wanted you to have experience, but then no one would hire you so that you could get the experience. And so it was definitely a very interesting time period. And so I had to become really creative. I ended up working at the legislature and worked for a state agency and did that. And that was a great experience. But I really wanted to practice law. I really wanted to help people. And so through some different events, and I like to describe it as, you remember when you were a kid and you were in a gym and they split it into two teams and there were two team captains and the captains began choosing people, right? So what I felt like was that kid who no one chose. No one chose. And eventually I had to stop waiting for someone to choose me, and I had to create it for myself. And so that's how I opened up my law practice and it was really through helping a family member who had her children taken. And so it built upon that. And at the last hearing, the other attorney in court said, Judge, I just want to say that without Shanelle on this case, I don't think she would have gotten her children back. And she's done a really great job with helping her navigate and understand the process. And based upon that kind of verbal accolade, it allowed me to begin practicing. And so I did that for 9 years, and it was an amazing experience. But then life began to change, and I needed to navigate out of that process because my husband became the district attorney of Wyandotte County. We had 4 children, and life became very busy, and I couldn't do the kind of day-to-day interacting with clients that I wanted to. So I navigated out of that space and was able to still work with families. So I actually created a vlog, a video video journal, and I went around Kansas and interviewed folks who were working within the child welfare system and connected with people who were running for office, and actually interviewed now Governor Laura Kelly. And it was wonderful. Just got to hear kind of her heart and her thoughts on how to make things work better. And through that connection and just so many others, now I am an administrator and was appointed into this position and work for the Department for Children and Families. So I still get to work with families. I still get to use my legal skills, but I'm not in the courtroom necessarily.
That's fantastic. That's a very exciting story and journey. And let's put it in perspective. You are in Kansas, Kansas City, Kansas, which is my hometown. You are a graduate of Washburn School of Law in Topeka, my law school as well. So there are a lot of connections we share in common. So I'm very proud of your accomplishments, and I'm interested in how you moved into that space that you talked about. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But I want to talk first about how you balance all those things. Wife, mother of four, full-time position. Just how do you do it? I call you a multitasker supreme. How do you handle it?
Well, some days and not well others. I'll say that, no one, I think, has the answer on how to navigate things, but what connects everything for me is my faith. And when I know that I am walking the path that I'm called to walk, then I'm excited about it, right? It's not a struggle. And then when it is a struggle, I need to stop and figure out exactly what is it that is too full and how can I begin to remove those items from my plate. I think sometimes we feel like such a strong obligation to stay in a space. But if your time is done, then it's time to move on. So I've gotten really good at understanding, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need to move around versus I need to be here because there's something that I need to get that's going to help somebody else. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. And I'm sure that I'd like to figure out how you came to figure those things out. What about your upbringing? Did you as a little girl believe that one day I'm going to be a lawyer, or I have this dream of becoming this mother and wife and all of those things? What were the dreams as you grew up?
Yeah, so I call myself, I have deep Midwestern roots. So I was born in Nebraska, moved to Oklahoma, where I did all of my schooling, all of my undergrad, went to Oklahoma State University, and then came to Kansas for law school, and that's where we're raising our kids. And then, my father was in the military, and so we lived in England for 4 years as well. And so, really rooted in structure and, making a decision and following through with it. My father is a pastor as well. And so all of those things really influenced me. My mother is a teacher, the most brilliant teacher that I know, an instructor. And so I remember I've just always been a person who asks a lot of questions. And so I got on my Sunday school teacher's nerves because you can't just tell me something and then I just accept it. We need to have a conversation, and it's not, you're not trying to be combative. You just want to understand. And so I've always had that. And it's really a strength because you can really, once you get an understanding, you can really relay that back and explain that as well. So when I was 10, I wrote in my Bible, Attorney Shanelle Gunn. That was my maiden name. So I knew that I wanted to do this, but then when I got to college and was about to graduate, I hadn't applied to any law schools. And I had to kind of do a deep dive and figure out what am I doing with my life? And why haven't I taken the next step? And it was fear. It was being afraid of failure. It was being afraid of the unknown. I hadn't seen an attorney in my life. And so ultimately I decided, well, Shanelle, you need to do something. So I applied to 2 law schools in Oklahoma and applied to a law school in Kansas. And it's funny because The only way that Mark, my husband, is actually the connection to how I even was aware of Washburn. But I ultimately got into Washburn Law School, and that's where it started. I knew that I didn't want to practice in like a big firm. I always knew that I wanted to help people, although I wasn't clear on what that looked like. And so once I got into law school, got into Washburn and started at the clinic, and had some of my professors, I felt it. It was like family law. I want to help families. I was blessed to have a family that wasn't perfect, by all means, but we stayed together, and we help one another. And so for me, that thing in your gut, right, that thing that bothers you, it's when families aren't safe. It's when families are split apart. And so I wanted to use my talents and skills and thoughts to figure out a way to create safety and help families.
Wonderful, beautiful story. And that leads to my question. We're talking to Shanelle Dupree, who's a lawyer and author and speaker, and she's involved with families and children in the state of Kansas. Explain exactly what you do with children and families.
Yeah. So when I had my law practice, I would represent children as a guardian ad litem. So I would represent their best interest when they were involved in the child in need of care court, which is, foster care, basically, when they were removed from their parents. And then I would also represent parents through the foster care system. And it's something because while I was doing that, I saw that parents just really didn't understand what was happening in the system. And so I created a course and taught that for 5 years for parents on how to navigate the system. And so now I'm in more of an administrative role, which gives me a totally different kind of perspective on how our federal laws affect parents and how they're able to see their kids and all of that. And what is really kind of what I'm really passionate about and really working towards right now is talking about racial disparities in the child welfare system. Mm-hmm. So in my current role, I'm the regional director of the Department for Children and Families, and I supervise 450 employees and cover 5 counties. And we don't just do child welfare. We do, food assistance and vocational rehab and all of that. But racial disparities in the child welfare system, I think, is the topic that we really need to be talking about, that not a lot of people are talking about. Children of color are in the system almost twice the rate that they're in the population, which is a problem. Once kids get into the system, it takes children of color longer to come out of the system. Their experiences are worse. They don't achieve permanency, so either adoption or reintegrating at the same rate. And that's a travesty because, again, connections are so important for our children. And so, again, back to that thing within my belly, that thing within my gut, that really moves me forward. And it's families who are unnecessarily ripped apart. And as the state, we can't do that. We can't be a part of that any longer. And so we're having these I call them courageous conversations on how we can figure out from where we sit in our position, what can we do to achieve equity within the child welfare system.
And Shanelle, do you feel that you're having some success and making some progress in this regard? Along with that, I'm sure politics and the whole political environment, as well as the pandemic, all of those environmental things are impacting on you. How do you feel you're doing at this time?
Yeah, I feel like I'm making an impact. I think what I've learned is that from where you sit, what can you do? So, for instance, when George Floyd was murdered, when that happened, it affected me deeply. And when I saw the image, I was bothered. Yet when I went to work and we were in these meetings, there was no acknowledgement. We weren't talking about it. And I felt like I was going crazy. And so I actually emailed the secretary of the Department for Children and Families and just laid it out there, just said, hey, listen, this is what I'm feeling as an African American that works within the agency. This is how it's affecting me. And this is what I want to do. So what I asked to do was basically to draft an article talking about racial disparities within the child welfare system, and talking about how our new Kansas practice model, so how we're working with families now, is for racial equity, is for engaging with families. We're not just making decisions in a closet and telling families what should happen. We're bringing families to the table through different programs that we're now doing. And so I asked to write that for the Bar Journal, and really talk about the history and why it's so hard to talk about race in America. And she said yes. And then a couple months later, the department instituted a phenomenal diversity and equity and inclusion training program for all of the employees to take. And now we're hiring a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. And we're looking for opportunities to move that conversation forward. So I'm not saying that I'm the one that started it, but I know I was a part of it. And it takes us to be bold and to make those, to talk about just those different perspectives that we bring to our role.
Well, thank you for that. Let me ask one other question to follow up. Tell us about the context here in Kansas about the racial disparities. What is the makeup? African American, Hispanics, Asians? What's sort of the breakdown?
Yeah, so in Kansas, 88% Caucasian, and about 7% African American, and 1% of Native American, Asian Americans, and every other ethnicity, basically. So the interesting thing, though, is that Hispanics are counted as Caucasians, according to the census, and that's how we count our data as well. So I don't have a super clear number in concern of the Hispanic population in Kansas, but it is predominantly a Caucasian state. But again, to those numbers, it's 8% for African Americans, yet kids are in the foster care system at 22%, right? So there's a problem there, and it's something that we have to keep talking about.
That's interesting about Hispanics being counted as Caucasians, because I've been back and forth to Kansas, living in New Mexico now, and I noticed my area, and your spouse is the district attorney in Wyandotte County, and that's where I grew up. That is becoming almost a large Hispanic population there now. So it's growing.
Wyandotte. Wyandotte is the most diverse county in Kansas. So Wyandotte is 33% African American, 33% Caucasian, and about 33% Hispanic. So yes, it is. It's definitely growing. But we are the most diverse county in Kansas.
Well, that is terrific, and you're making an impact on children and families, and you feel very good about it. What are the things that you think you're looking at for the future in order to make the system work even more efficiently? What are your next steps?
So I think my next steps are just within the agency, definitely bringing that more so to light, just because we have a lot of work to do. And it's not just our agency, it's our community partners as well. So I see our agency as really the connector that can bring all of these folks together to begin talking about the impact. I'm the chair of the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee as well, which it was an amazing thing that Kansas did for juveniles, which said, hey, it doesn't work when kids go deeper into the system. If kids are stealing, they don't need to be in prison. We need to figure out what's happening. Are they stealing food? Are they hungry? Right? And provide those community programs from where they live. We don't need to rip them from their community. So I'm the chair of that. So that was Senate Bill 367. But although we're making an impact, the question is the impact felt for all children across all races? And so that's something that we're diving deeper into as well. So that's professional. Personally, I just wrote a book, Bible Study Perspectives, and the thing that I know balances me and connects me is my faith and my relationship with God. But I do think that through every phase, I've had to recalibrate that and think how that looks differently. And I've been in church my entire life, but if you bring me a Bible and just tell me to start reading, I may fall asleep because I need structure. I want to imagine some things. I want it to be interesting and creative. And so that's what I created, a guide for people who want to dive deeper into their relationship with God, but are overwhelmed and don't really know where to start. So it's a guide where I'm bringing like the legal perspective. I'm talking about like Adam and Eve, how they were evicted, and just that perspective. I bring out like some Supreme Court cases. I'm talking about family dynamics. And so it's just bringing different perspectives and encouraging folks to look at the Bible as something that is related to your life. So I'm really excited about that project.
That was one of my next questions, to get a little deeper into your book about Bible perspectives and what that means. And so I'm glad you talked about it. And if you can add a little more to it, because this is something I think is very, very important, because you're laying out a perspective in the use of the Bible in everyday life. And I think that's a wonderful approach. You want to add any more to that?
Yeah, I'll say that I think sometimes people feel overwhelmed, and they don't really know where to start. And I think we've been led to believe that, I went to church on Sunday, or I read that inspirational quote, and so I'm good. But the truth is that in any relationship, it has to be, number one, a two-way street. And then it has to be something more than, an hour or two on Sunday. It has to be an ongoing conversation. I think about my husband, and if he only talked to me on a Sunday for an hour, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. We need to be talking more. But so with Bible study perspectives, I'm giving people basically a roadmap. I'm giving them a guide on how to think about it. And I'm, of course, providing my own, but then I'm encouraging people to think about, how does this apply to your life? So something for me is, I love like books and movies. And so I'm connecting it to books and movies as well, thinking about Adam and Eve, how they were, I call it evicted from the Garden of Eden. I think about, well, who else has been like kicked out? Who else has been evicted? And my mind goes to the Will Smith movie, The Pursuit of Happiness, and how him and his son were at their lowest point and they were evicted. And then the question is, what comes next? Like, what decision do you make after you're at the very bottom? And there's always a path forward. And so I'm connecting it with movies, I'm connecting it with books, and it's feeding my creative side. So I love this project.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. We're talking to Shanelle Dupree. She's an author, speaker, wife, and mother of four. And you're listening to Left, Right, Forward. This is a show with a purpose: to educate, to inform, and to motivate. And my guest today, Shanelle Dupree, is doing exactly all of those things. So as we close out, Shanelle, I'd like for you to give some thoughts to our viewers and listeners, and particularly to young women and women of color, as to how you do this and what would you advise them to do as a person of color.
Yeah, so what I would say is that it's really important for you not to wait for your name to be called, for you not to wait for someone to choose you, because if you do that, you are going to be waiting sometimes for your entire life. And your value, the perspective that you bring is needed in our world today. And if you sit on the sidelines and sulk, right, and never join the game, then not only are you missing out, but you are stopping somebody from being helped, somebody from being assisted. And so what I would say, I think it's pretty simple. Just don't wait for your name to be called. That passion, that thing inside of your gut that bothers you, that inspires you, start taking the steps to do that thing.
Thank you so much. That's excellent advice. We've been talking to Shanelle Dupree, and she's just a wonderful role model, not only for women of color, but from all people, that she had a plan in life. She grew up with a family that was supportive. She had a dream of helping and serving, and she took that dream into action. And her message tonight is to all of us today is to act on those dreams. So you're listening to Left, Right, Forward, the interview show with a purpose. to educate, to inform, to motivate. So thank you, Shanelle Dupree, for being with us today, and Godspeed in your efforts ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Lewis.
You have been listening and viewing the Left, Right, Forward show, the interview show with a purpose to educate, to inspire, to motivate, and to inform. And you have been watching Shanelle Dupree, author, lawyer, wife, mother of four, a person who had a dream growing up in a family that supported her, a dream to become a lawyer, a dream to help families, a dream to make our society better. Not only did she have the dream, she acted on the dream. Graduated from Oklahoma State University and Washburn School of Law in Topeka, Kansas, where she met her husband, who was also a law student, and they together have a family of four. And she's about the business in Kansas of helping families and helping with society and the state to make things better for all. So tune in again to Left, Right, Forward, the show with a purpose, to motivate, to inform, and to inspire. Until next time, Godspeed.